Join me, Mark Windows, for Windows on the World live every Sunday 9 to 11 PM GMT. Check out our archive and programme stream at windowsontheworld.net. Good evening, everybody. Welcome. Well, good evening, anybody, and good evening, everybody. Welcome to Windows on the World. I'm going to do a follow-up this week to the show we did last week, Citizens' Assemblies, the End of Choice, because it's so important. This subject is something that we've been covering for such a long time, and it's a culmination of what we talk about pretty much all the time. It's about the removal of all choice, the removal of all public input, something that has been going on since the inception of the big society in 2010. And we've covered this from so many angles, but it is the most important thing that's going on. Last week's show, People's Assemblies, basically showed you the big communitarian lie, because that's what's being imposed. The controlling of the narrative of all public opinion is being done in your face. And of course, it's been facilitated, that's the word, it's been facilitated by this fake protest group, which is basically a lobbying organisation called Extinction Rebellion. Remember, they were advocating citizens' assemblies and sortition. We're going to get into all that tonight. It's quite incredible the way it all fits together, this jigsaw puzzle. But the result of the big society, which came out of 2010, and the UN Global Governance Initiatives is what this is all about and where it's been heading for a long time. And just to recap, this is a quote from last week's show, and please look at that. People's Assemblies, the End of Choice was the last show, the show before this, and there's some essential information in there. In fact, I can't reiterate that enough, so do have a listen to that one if you get a chance and you haven't listened to it already. Basically, just to recap, I quoted this on last week's show, and this was from the report of the Commission on Global Governance by the United Nations in 1996. Also, we have to remember that a lot of this stuff came out of a document called Our Common Future, which was all about this centralisation of power, basically through the World Bank and NGOs. This idea, this template that we see now, if you're looking carefully enough, and actually, you don't have to look too carefully to see it these days. It's there and it's in your face. And yes, we've spent a long time talking about it, but it is the most important thing that's going on. This is a shadow government. This is what they mean by the end of democracy. This is the destruction of what's going on in Western democracies all over the world with the help of people like George Soros. And yes, he's involved with the citizens' assemblies. Isn't that a surprise? Just as he's involved with the fake revolution, the fake protest group, the fake lobbying group for the UN global initiatives, which is called Extinction Rebellion. Well, basically, this is from the concept of global governance, 1996. It said, there is no alternative to working together and using collective power to create a better world. Remember, this is all about collectivism. It's about the idea that everyone agrees. Well, actually, they don't. It's a way of making it look as though everyone agrees, and it's called consensus. It carries on at the global level. Governance has been viewed primarily as intergovernmental relationships, but it must now be understood as also involving non-governmental organisations, the shadow government, citizens' movements, there you go, your citizens' assemblies, multinational corporations, of course, and the global capital market. So that's basically your new governance. Your new governance is non-governmental organisations, citizens' movements, like Extinction Rebellion, multinational corporations who are running everything, and the global capital market. We're going to get onto that as the show progresses. A lot of information in tonight's show. Basically, yes, it carries on. Interacting with these are global mass media of dramatically enlarged influence. Global mass media of dramatically enlarged influence. There must be an agreed global framework for actions and policies to be carried out at appropriate levels. A multifaceted strategy for global governance is required. Well, they're spelling it out to you there, aren't they? All pretty obvious. And it's all happened. What a surprise. But yeah, interacting with these global mass media, the global mass media. Remember what Marshall McLuhan said? He was all about the invention of social engineering. In fact, I passed one of his books today, And it's actually called The Media is the Massage, which is based on his work because he coined the phrase, the media is the message. He also coined the phrase, the global village. So he knew where it was all going, and social engineers of every type have known where this is all going for years. In fact, if you want to know more about it, book one of our shows, The Bigger Picture. You can do that through Windows on the World, and we're going to get into that also tonight, because those are where the real citizens' assemblies happen. So the real citizens' assemblies are basically what we put together. The citizens' assemblies, which the government and the global governance strategies are backing, are not citizens' assemblies at all. They're lobbying, and they're looking for the useful idiots who lobby on behalf of the globalist objectives, which is United Nations Agenda 2030, which came out of United Nations Agenda 21, all revealed in our talks. And I talk about this stuff a lot because it's very, very important. But let's carry on with what we were saying in 1996. I'm digressing here. It said this will involve reforming and strengthening the existing system of intergovernmental institutions and improving its means of collaboration with private and independent groups, which is what we are going to be talking about this evening and what we talked about on last week's show. It carries on. It is our firm conclusion that the United Nations must continue to play a central role in global governance. And oh, they do. Yes, they are at the head of it all, the shadow government. So the antidote is real citizens' assemblies to crush their revolution, the revolution that's been given to you. Take a look at the homepage of Windows on the World and catch up with what we said in last week's show, that most recent show, Citizens' Assemblies, the End of Choice. We described how public participation in local planning has been taken away. And the recent citizens' assemblies in Oxford, we talked about that last week, will usher in draconian restrictions on private travel and the closing of streets to all traffic. This is what it's all about. It's getting consent for the destruction of what you used to call your community, which is a very misused word. But basically, the implementation of this first citizens' assembly in Oxford is being kind of lobbied by Clyde Lokes, who's now the deputy leader of Waltham Forest Council. And he was basically the front puppet for implementation of a thing called Mini Holland in Waltham Forest, which was the United Nations Agenda 21 policies of closing all the streets, calling them rat runs, and basically high density housing and smart city agendas, which is basically what you could say an open concentration camp, which is what much of London has already turned into. But what we did last week was we got our Citizens' Assembly, which is the listeners to the show, to put a dislike and to put some comments on this video, which was linked to the Windows on the World website, and it was all about Mini Holland and livability in Oxford. And it was telling you what a great idea Mini Holland had been. So a lot of our listeners put comments on and they were shadow banned. Now, this is absolutely incredible because in order to shadow ban, Google must be in on it. This is what I understand of shadow banning. So basically what you can do is you can stop people from commenting on your videos. You can disable comments, but they didn't do that. The comments were being seen by the people who put the comments on. Like I put some comments on, I can see my comments, but at the top it says no comments. And everyone else who put comments on can see their own comments, but can't see anybody else's. So there's no comments visible to the public. So this is being controlled at a very, very high level. And that's really why we talk about it a lot, because the importance of this can't be underestimated. This is the death of public input. Basically, have a look on the front page of windowsontheworld.net and you will be able to see that video all about livability in Mini Holland and the useful front puppet who's implementing it now in Oxford. And this was actually so unpopular in Waltham Forest that there was a huge demonstration at the town hall, which they've managed to undermine as well. And of course, a lot of this is about controlling the narrative. So if you get a protest, you control a protest. And that's exactly what they did. They used the protest to say that there was a vocal minority, but the sleeping majority were the people who never said anything, who wanted it. I mean, you couldn't make it up, really. But this is the audacious nature of what we call change agents, people who are working in the public sector to bring about the change that they want you to see. But yes, the implementation of this agenda in Waltham Forest was very unpopular. This is basically about the closing off of all the streets and the hive housing, high density housing, the smart cities agenda, 5G, all the rest of it. It's all interlinked. But just have a look at it. Go to windowsontheworld.net and go to the front page. So, yeah, the alternative. What is the alternative to the controlling of the narrative of public opinion? Well, the alternative is to form real people's assemblies. And that's what I want to reiterate. Form your own people's assembly, because these people's assemblies are being put together by corporations who are basically filtering out anybody who's got a functioning brain cell. I'm not saying the people on these people assemblies are stupid, but they're being mentored into a program. So yes, our latest poster says windowsontheworld.net presents the Real People's Assembly. They decide your future. Who are they? Global policies bypass all national governments. The climate of change is driven by global policy. It's not the weather. Everything you need to know, but we're never told. Join us and get the bigger picture. I think that's a bit more snappy than the description that we previously gave, which may have been a bit confusing to some people. But now we have to get into the propaganda war. I'm always interested in using as few words as possible, and that is the art of communication, I think. But yes, that's us, by the way. So that's what's coming out of this show, and that's what we are advocating, and that's what we'd like to see is real people's assemblies up and down the country. Our talks are the Real People's Assembly, so please join us and organise your own. Yes, this is the real revolution. Not the one created for you through social engineers and psychologically controlled narratives. That's to sum up what I was talking about in the first part of the show. But please look up our last show, People's Assemblies, The End of Choice. There is so much information in there. So this week is like a follow-on from that. I want to give you some information, first of all, about our forthcoming talks. And you can book the talks, the bigger picture. I've been touring this around along with Piers Corbyn and Sandy Adams, and we've all been turning up at village halls and community centres up and down the country. On Friday the 1st of November, we're actually at Glastonbury Town Hall, 7 to 11 p.m. It's £10 on the door, and it's the bigger picture, climate of change and the grand solar minimum. That's with myself, Sandy Adams and Piers Corbyn and special guest David Dubine, who's going to be talking about the solar minimum. Now, there is actually quite a lot of contention as to how long the solar minimum is going to last. And that to me is not even that important in the bigger scheme of things, because I'm more interested in the social engineering aspect of how it's being used. But yes, it's a fascinating subject, and do turn up Friday 1st of November at Glastonbury Town Hall if you're in that area. Now on Saturday 9th of November, the bigger picture is in Brighton and the venue is still to be announced. I will be announcing that next week, or everybody who's booked through Eventbrite will actually get a link to where we are going to be doing that talk. And that's 12 till 6 p.m. in Brighton. There's an Eventbrite bookings page on windowsontheworld.net homepage. On Saturday 16th of November, we're in Bristol at the Arc. We did a talk there previously. It's a great little venue. The Arc, 27 Broad Street, Bristol, BS1 2HG. And there's an event Facebook page, an Eventbrite Facebook page on... Oh, actually, the event page. It's just a Facebook page for that one. You can go and look at that. And that's on windowsontheworld.net homepage. On Sunday 24th of November, the bigger picture is in Aberdeen. Turriff Baden-Powell Community Centre, Baden-Powell Road, Turriff, AB53 4FE. And there is an Eventbrite bookings page for that one. That's the bigger picture Aberdeen. Saturday 30th of November, the bigger picture Colchester. And that's going to be 1:30 p.m. till 7 p.m. And it's £10 in advance and £12 on the door. It's at Tollgate Hall, which is behind the Stanway Community Centre, Villa Road, Colchester. CO30RH, and there is an Eventbrite bookings page. Now, that's Cliff in Colchester who's put that together, and also we put together this poster. We got this template together, which we probably will be using in the future. Now, we've got down the text on the poster to exactly what I said at the beginning of the show, and we went over that the other night, and Cliff had some ideas, and we put our heads together, and we got that poster, which is a lot simpler than the one we've been using. So I'm grateful to Cliff for actually getting on the phone, because we've been moving around quite a lot, and with all the research that I do and the input to the shows, sometimes this stuff gets left out. Now, if you're interested in contributing or putting on a bigger picture talk, please get in touch through the website. Now, we're going to talk about something I found on basically a brainwashing platform called Climate Home News, and it dovetails into what this show's about. UN agency calls for global Green New Deal to overhaul financial system. Now, this was published recently. It says the current financial system cannot deliver public goods on the scale needed to cope with climate change, a UN official says. Who'd have thought? Well, the climate change agenda was always about financial control, as we have reported over many years. The climate of change is about the climate of control. It carries on. Only a global Green New Deal can provide governments with the muscle needed to take on the climate crisis, a UN Development Agency report released on Wednesday said. Now, this article is from the 25th of this month. The United Nations Conference on Trade and Development, UNCTAD, which was founded in 1964 to help, guess what, developing countries to access equitable international trade, called on governments to overhaul the rules of the international trade and monetary systems so that all countries, in particular developing ones, could carry out the necessary mass investments to decarbonise their economies. In other words, to destroy their existing economies. UNCTAD Secretary General Mukiza Kitori said meeting the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which include reining in the heating of the planet. You couldn't make up this sort of talk, could you really? How are they going to rein in the heating of the planet, keeping it under that threshold of 1.5 degrees? Well, your guess is as good as mine, and it's as good as theirs, because they don't know what they're talking about either. It carries on. It requires rebuilding multilateralism around the idea of a global Green New Deal. Remember what we said at the beginning of the show about this controlling of the narrative of everything through these globalist objectives, and that all came out of the UN. And it says, I'm pursuing a financial future very different from the recent past. Oh, it'll be very different from the recent past, all right, because any kind of money that you've been able to make for yourself will be a thing of the past in the future. The new communitarian aims of Agenda 21, the new global totalitarianism, is about to strip you of everything. Let's see what else they said. The global economy does not serve all people equally, said Richard Kozel Wright, director of UNCTAD's Division on Globalisation and Development Strategies, who oversaw the project. Under the current configuration of policies, rules, market dynamics and corporate power, economic gaps are likely to increase and environmental degradation intensify. Well, this was always the plan from the Club of Rome, to actually create the pollution so we could have the problem. And of course, what we have now is the mixture of pollution, weather and climate change into one overall do-it-yourself environmental program called United Nations Agenda 21, which is do-it-yourself by the United Nations. It says, instead of hoping to fix the crisis in developing countries through a blend of public and private sector initiatives, which are UNCTAD's press release branded as taken from the playbook of banking conglomerates, the development agency urged governments to take the lead. Well, that's what they've always been trying to do. It says, among a battery of global reforms, UNCTAD recommended granting debt relief and revising the way that debt was structured in order to allow developing countries to pay for green policies. You couldn't make it up, could you? They get them into monstrous amounts of debt by lending them money for the very policies which are going to destroy the country. Very clever plan. But the basic debt strategy of getting countries in line by forcing them to comply with the UN Agenda 2030 plans, that's what all this is about. This will, of course, help to bankrupt them, to keep everyone in line. No one will be left behind, as the UN say, and poverty for all is the only social equity available. That's what social equity is all about, poverty for all. It carries on anyway. We need a set of rules in place that can handle sovereign debt problems when they emerge in much fairer, efficient and transparent ways than is the case today. In other words, they control all narratives. The agency also called on the creation of a, wait for it, Global Environmental Protection Fund. Well, this is what the World Bank were talking about in 1983. That would provide predictable and stable emergency funding. What, for the climate emergency? Of course. This could be financed by tapping into special drawing rights. Remember that? SDR, special drawing rights, basically creating money out of thin air with these bonds, an international monetary reserve currency originally set up by the International Monetary Fund to act as a supplement to national currencies. The international community should put an international system into place to oversee capital flow between countries, including developing ones, echoing recent calls to create a European climate bank. Now, we've talked about this before. It's not actually necessary to have a climate bank because every bank by default has to be a climate bank. It has to fall in with these rules because banks will not lend to countries who do not comply with the United Nations totalitarian Agenda 2030 system. It carries on. Authors also suggested shifting the role of central banks from taming inflation to aggressively championing climate finance. To checkmate tax evasion, well, basically, it means if you've got any money that the government don't know about, then they want it. It further called on the establishment of a global minimum corporate tax rate on multinationals between 20 and 25% combined with capital controls. Well, of course, the multinationals all have their way out of this unless they are the sort of corporations that the banks and the UN want to punish. The biggest scam ever invented is about to loot every economy in the world. This is what we have been getting prepared for, basically. This is a big public investment push. It says you need public banks to finance this because we don't think that the current financial system as it is currently constructed will ever deliver finance to the public goods of this kind on the scale that we're talking about. Wow. In the absence of such constraints, green finance could increase to around 1.7 trillion every year, according to UNCTAD's estimates, generating at least 170 million jobs in the world and allowing a clean industrialisation in the global south. This is, of course, the front for the global looting operation. Well, the Green New Deal, it says, envisages mobilising the state to tackle social inequality and carbon emissions as one, which is what it's all about. The climate of financial change. That's what this is about. It's not about climate change. It's not about finance. It's about the climate of financial change. The way that climate policy is used to implement these agendas, which are going to loot every government in the world. It was popularized in the US by Congresswoman Alexandra Ocasio-Cortez and has since become a plank policy for US Democratic candidates. Yes, it's implemented by planks. British economist Anne Pettifor, part of the original London Green New Dealers group, called the report enormously significant because while the UN and its scientists have taken the lead on a scientific side on this crisis, yes, the United Nations IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, is not a scientific body, but merely a lobbying group to prove that anthropogenic global warming is real so that they can implement taxation on the back of it, which is the new form of benefice, which is called sustainable development. The new form of benefice, in other words, you pay for your sins of breathing out. Well, this was the whole plan from the Rio Summit 92 onwards. The documents we have covered, such as Our Common Future, were laying out the foundations of creating the IPC as this lobbying body for climate change. pushing its predictions which would drive the world population into enslavement and poverty through the Gaia religion and the benefits of green taxation. Just summing up that little section for you there. But basically, it carries on. This is a crisis that doesn't belong in one place. It's neither a north nor south crisis. Of course not, it's global. And it requires global collaboration, Pettifor said. It's echoing the revolutionary monetary theory underpinning the New Deal. Pettifor likened the reorientation of the monetary system recommended by UNCTAD to Roosevelt's decision to ditch the gold standard. Well, yes, in other words, give the World Bank and the IMF the power to create massive debt, rob the world through usury on the back of the climate apocalypse. What could be easier? It's all in place. But what a deceptive misdirection to take all monetary power into the hands of the World Bank and creating it all out of thin air. An unaccountable system which will steal all financial freedom. I think that's pretty clear with what they've been saying there. We've got to learn from Roosevelt if we are to tackle the climate crisis right now. This is unbelievable. It's almost verging into insanity, isn't it? And that is what UNCTAD is trying to do. Pettifor said, of course it is. So the end game is to take everything on the back of the biggest lie in human history, and the population are right behind it. Consent is everything, and manufacturing consent is essential. And to emphasise the stupidity of the financial world, this article is from the BBC. Get this. Andrew Medhurst was a high flyer. He earned a six-figure salary and had worked all over the world for the likes of Lloyds Bank and HSBC, but he gave it all up to join Extinction Rebellion. Well, you would, wouldn't you? It's good wages and the hours are very tolerable, you know. You can get up when you want, go out, do a bit of lobbying, lie down in the road, go to Waitrose, get your shopping, do a dye-in, do some yoga on the bridge. I mean, fantastic. Won't even have to pay for the gym. He says it was around Christmas last year when he suddenly snapped. He was designing pension plan policies aimed at encouraging young people to put money away for the future. But after reading up on climate change, I wonder who put this into his highly inactive and minuscule brain, reading up on climate change. I wonder what climate change he was reading up on. It wouldn't be the UNIPCC version of climate change, would it? I think it might be. And as he reflected on the scorching summer of 2018, it wasn't that scorching, go back and look at the records before the official records started. Go back 100 years, go back pre-1974, or even look at 1977, that was hotter than 2018. The 53-year-old came to the conclusion that pension schemes looked almost fraudulent. Well, financial fraud is what keeps the City of London alive, but don't tell anyone now, will you? Because the effects of global warming threatened the future those young people were saving for. He's really put this together, hasn't he? There is no beginning or end to the stupidity of the present time human race. There just can't be. Or it seems that way if you're looking at anything coming out of the BBC. It says he handed in his notice at Nest, the National Employment Savings Trust, and told colleagues he was leaving to campaign for the planet. He's leaving to campaign for the planet. I'm going to leave and I'm not doing Windows on the World anymore. I'm going to leave and campaign for the planet. His banking background made him an ideal person to look after the group's finances and donations. Well, I hope he runs off with it all. I don't think he will, though, because he believes in man-made global warming. Well, that is a fraud, isn't it? Maybe. So, as if Extinction Rebellion needed any more corporate socially engineered greed, they've now got some. Since then, it says, he has been arrested twice, run as a candidate in the European parliamentary elections, where he collected 420 votes, and annoyed his 24-year-old son, who thinks his father could have done more for the environment by staying in his job. He thinks I'm a bit of an idiot, Mr. Medhurst says. Well, it's not just him, you know. There's quite a lot of us. But we agree to disagree. Well, that's interesting, isn't it? So you've got the older generation being actually told by the younger generation that they're idiots, and it's usually the other way round. So, well, actually, the parents are joining in with Extinction Rebellion, so maybe there is no hope. But, well, there is hope for the younger generation if they think the older generation are idiots, I suppose. The movement has yet to notch up any concrete policy changes as a result of its actions. That's Extinction Rebellion. Well, that's not true, because they're basically a lobbying group for the United Nations and globalism and George Soros and the big totalitarian New Big Society. That's all they are. They're a lobbying group. They're not a protest group, although it has certainly contributed to raising public awareness of climate issues. Well, basically, it's the climate of change. Yeah. So he says, I've done my fair share of damage, he admits. No, you've not. You've only just started. Having led a high carbon lifestyle. Have you led a high carbon lifestyle? Largely out of ignorance. Nowadays he avoids flying and is not ashamed to be seen in frayed tops that have the odd hole. Radical transparency. It is from the BBC. I mean, you couldn't make up this, could you? Only an overprivileged idiot could actually, come up with something as insane as this. The press has pointed to the way it is raking in money from members to support its operations, and Mr. Medhurst says the group has raised more than 2.5 million this year. 2.5 million. These parasites have raised. Between the beginning of March and the end of September, gifts from large donors, those giving 5,000 or more, total 1.2 million. The list of benefactors includes the rock band Radiohead, which gave the organisation £300,000. And it's interesting, actually, that they don't put out that George Soros donated a larger amount to that. But you can't mention Soros on the BBC, can you? Unless it's his son, Alexander Soros, who's actually making documentaries for them. Yeah, look it up. He is. He's on the European Council for Foreign Relations, is Alexander Soros, for Hungary, I think. But as we reported on last week's show, Extinction Rebellion is for the destruction of Western democracy and is directly in line with the globalisation agenda. They are actually about the forthcoming demise of Western democracy. Yes, it's in their aims and objectives. Do have a listen to last week's show. Yeah, last week we covered the most totalitarian imposition ever, the introduction of the citizens' assemblies. Following on from that, we look at the company now, which has been awarded, get this, the contract to roll it out. We covered Mori, who do the polls, and Ipsos, and the the Social Research Institute, which could easily have been based on the Institute of Social Research, which was the cultural Marxist organisation, which came out of the 1930s, called the Frankfurt School, which ended up in America, in New York. But yes, they have their own Institute of Social Research, do Ipsos, and Mori, who do the polls, who are at this moment recruiting the useful idiots who will be steered into the predetermined outcomes that give the agenda to the citizens' assemblies. Yes, let's get this. 5th of September 2019, the contract to run the citizens' assembly has been awarded to Involve. From the Commons Select Committee, basically, Soros is involved in Involved, okay? Very much so. This is the corporate revolution and it's very well funded. It says Involve will be working in partnership with My Society and the Sortition Foundation. This is what Gail Bradbrook was talking about to get the citizens' assemblies going. Sortition. So basically, this group called Involve, this NGO, is working with My Society and the Sortition Foundation. It says they work on the scope, time frame and programme for the Citizens' Assembly on climate change. And it will now begin. Details of assembly sessions, programmes and questions tackled by the Assembly will be announced at a later date. Well, we know it started in Oxford, and loads of these brain-dead British councils have now declared climate emergencies. Yes, they have. It's an epidemic. It's a mind virus. Well, this is from the My Society website. We help people be active citizens. Did you need any help with that? Well, you're going to get some. Our technology, research and data are used by individuals, journalists and civil society in over 40 countries around the world. In other words, another change agent organisation controlling the narrative of public opinion. Yes, forcing all participation into the accepted opinion corridor. That's what citizens' assemblies are all about. It says we uncover facts, bring about change, the C word. Yeah, they never tell you what the change is, though. The change is the new totalitarianism. And drive campaigns forward for citizens, journalists, campaigners and researchers. So it's a bunch of trained monkeys who train untrained monkeys. How many of these organisations are there? Well, as we've reported, there's hundreds of thousands globally. As we said at the beginning of the show, NGOs are the shadow government, and this was the plan from the United Nations from 1996, and also predating that, 1987, Our Common Future, this document that came out, which was the precursor to all this. So it says on their website, through our work in transparency, you couldn't make it up, could you? Through our work in transparency, we support freedom of information sites like What Do They Know? Now, I've gone through What Do They Know, but they make it... all this is about is controlling the narrative of gatekeepers everywhere. It says we're developing new services to support the work of journalists and campaigners. Well, independent journalists don't need the support of NGOs. I don't need the support of NGOs. I do my own research. I don't read out press releases. That's why we call what we do journalism. And that's why what's in the papers is not journalism. It's press releases. We've reported on this time and time again. This is why you get so much basically perverting the course of public justice in newspapers, because these people are printing press releases and they don't think that they have any public liability for the things they're saying. We've come up against this time and time again. Big story on that coming out soon, all relating into the Reach PLC group, who probably run your local online newspaper. The Live group, Reach PLC. Yes, they print press releases from all these sort of organisations. Well, of course, The Guardian do as well, but The Guardian is just a big part of this. It's all part of the same kind of hive mind, the hive mind that we talk about all the time. Yeah, we're developing new services to support the work of journalists and campaigners like we need your support, and conducting research to build the evidence base for how transparency and access to information laws can help citizens become more active and engaged. So, leading the brainless scribblers of the press into creating their globalist PR press releases. It says freedom of information is a powerful way to hold authorities to account. Well, it is if you actually do it properly. But nobody needs an organisation like this to make a freedom of information request. This is just one side of what they do. This is the front for what they do. Basically, they're another narrative controlling organisation, training useful idiots and front puppets for, guess what? Their citizens' assemblies, yeah. Well, this is Globalism 101 with a bit of Brave New World thrown in, along with the usual sound bites to restrict the narrative of public opinion. It says, if you're a journalist who wants to uncover hidden facts, and you do that by going to a gatekeeping group, would you? Yeah, of course you would. A citizen who wants to know more about how your money is spent, or a campaigner ferreting out information, you'll find that these tools take the hard work out of requesting data from public authorities. This is the interface. This means that there is a huge problem here. Can you see what the problem is? I hope you can. So they are going to help you find hidden facts. That's good of them, isn't it? Well, the only way to find hidden facts is by using your own initiative. Anything truly hidden will remain hidden, as these are just the gatekeepers. It says we provide technology, research and data that help people to be active citizens. Well, I hope our real citizens' assemblies, the ones that I hope are forming around the country, don't need their technology or their research to be active citizens. My Society is a not-for-profit social enterprise based in the UK and working internationally. They're all international because it's global. We build online technologies that give people the power to get things changed. And we share these technologies so that they can be used anywhere. My Society is committed to providing the open source code, open data and repurposable tools that help hold power to account. No, they help keep power in place, actually. That's what they do. If you think this has a ring of communitarianism, big society and Soros, well, you won't be disappointed, because we're going to find out who funds them in a minute. Through our work in democracy, I mean, they've got more front than, more front than the Open Society, really, haven't they? We run projects and services in the UK and globally to support participation in society's democratic systems and access to political information and data. Through our work in democracy, we run projects and services in the UK and globally to support participation in society's democratic systems. This is all open society, folks. In other words, we steer you into getting what you need to know and nothing else. A large part of this is our input to the Democratic Commons, a collaborative endeavour encompassing dozens of accountability and parliamentary organisations around the world. Globalist gatekeeping, in other words. If you belong to an organisation that runs campaigns, it says, hopes to bring about change, the C word, or relies on getting the voice of your supporters heard, you'll find that our tools give you a head start. Well, they will, won't they? Because they're going to mentor you into being a global governance change agent. He says, or maybe you're simply a citizen who wants to help to change the world. Well, yes, the C word, the change the new totalitarians want you to be. Your evolution is our revolution. So let's look at the other puppet masters involved with the Citizens' Assemblies Involve organisation. These are the linked organisations to the Citizens' Assemblies chosen parliamentary organisation Involve. Let's have a look. The Sortition Foundation. The Sortition Foundation, take a look at them. We campaign for a world free from partisan politicking, where representative random samples of everyday people make decisions in informed and deliberative citizens' assemblies. Are you getting it yet? Are you getting it yet? You must be, surely. The penny must be dropping by now. Yes, one choice, no choice. Be the change we want you to be. Support our work, it says. Become a member, volunteer or donor. The website header of this organisation, right, the Sortition Foundation, is a group of people, 100 people, say, in a room with 10 round each table, as per your local consultation, if you've got a big council, where they seat you around a table with a facilitator and steer you into the intended outcome. It's in plain sight, folks. No, it's not a conspiracy theory. It's called the Delphi technique. It's just incredible. I mean, what I can't believe about this stuff is that every one of these narrative controlling organisations is exactly the same. They're exactly the same template. The template does not vary. I wish it would, because then I could be more investigative and it'd take up more time. But as it is, I actually find this stuff has become monotonous to the point where it's seen, it can't be unseen, and also you can't understand why most people aren't seeing it. It's because they're not given access to it. But then again, these organisations are going to give them access to the information they need, so they'll never find out. See how it works? It's great, isn't it? So basically, it says decisions are made in a deliberative, informed, fair and respectful environment. Basically stop lying just for once, okay? Your right to truth can't get in the way of a citizens' assembly or citizens' jury. So don't let a citizens' assembly get in the way of truth. Remember that Extinction Rebellion founder Gail Bradbrook was pushing sortition, and this is it, the new control system which is too big to fail. They say they're fair, and they randomly are selecting participants and gives every person an equal chance of being selected, regardless of age, gender, location. Yeah, the diversity bit. Yeah, we'll get on to the next bit. They're transparent as well. They're very transparent. We've seen right through them already, haven't we? Using stratified random selection and a clear, open process reduces the influence of vested interests. Well, they're all wearing the same vests and they've all got the same interests, so they don't need to actually look outside. You will not be engaging with the usual suspects. It says, no, you won't be engaging with anyone you used to engage with. You'll be engaging with the change agents who you are given to engage with. It says it's effective. Well, we know that. Hundreds of examples from around the world have shown that citizens' assemblies work. Yeah, they bypass governments everywhere. Informed. People develop an informed critical understanding of complex policy decisions. Okay, let's kind of decode that. No, what happens is they're steered into the mentoring program and they're given a load of crap that they are told is true, and they repeat it, like the climate change. So, in other words, the People's Assembly on Climate Change, you can't actually challenge the IPCC or the conspiracy theory that is man-made global warming. You can't challenge that. As we said on last week's show, do look at it, please. Citizens' Assembly is the end of choice. It's steered by facilitators, the whole thing. It says it's deliberative. Assembly members work together to identify the pros, cons and trade-offs of policy options. Well, Assembly members work together as a hive mind after they've been instructed. It says it's powerful. They open up the space for change when tackling wicked problems. Strange, isn't it? Wicked problems. What, like people who might not agree with them? Where interest or community groups are blocking progress? That's brilliant. I've got to read that one again. They open up the space for change. In other words, the change agent's coming in when tackling wicked problems. Now, this is their inverted commas, wicked problems, where interest or community groups are blocking progress. That means individuals who do not want to be mentored into a global totalitarian hive mind. That's how they shut them down. And they are powerful because they use this Delphi technique against anyone who gets in the way. They give decision makers increased confidence. Of course they do. They empower the useful idiots, which can gain an immeasurable boost if a citizens' assembly gives it near unanimous support. Innovative You, it says here, will be at the forefront of democratic innovation and citizen empowerment and engagement. Of course it will, unless you do something about it out there. They increase the legitimacy of public policy making. Well, of course they do. That's the whole point, because they make it look as though you've agreed to it all. That's the whole point of this narrative. And it says they trusted. Well, I'll disagree with that. People trust the outcomes as decisions are made by people like me. Well, they're not made by people like me. And I've got to tell you, they're not made by people like you who's listening to this show. They're made by people who have been changed or who didn't have a brain in the first place. So let's get back to the new democracy, the contractors for the Citizens' Assembly. They're partnered with My Society, a UK-based NGO founded in 2003 that helps people be active citizens with technology. Okay, and the Sortition Foundation. And they're all about social change. It says a just and inclusive society benefits us all. We fund ambitious and challenging work that puts those who have been marginalised at the heart of creating change. In other words, what they do is they mentor so-called minority groups. They invent minority groups and then use those to fracture society by attacking other people. So they get people who have a real issue and they set them on other people. That's all they do. So it's a huge distraction issue, creating the division they want to heal by controlling the narrative. A lot of this inclusion is about inventing minorities, yes, and then steering them all under the empowerment banner. It's so diverse and vibrant, though, isn't it? It says we support anchor organisations, which are a focal point for community-led action. Yeah, your community organisers, your change agents, the people in your local community hub, that's who they're talking about, or work which helps people come together in economically disadvantaged or isolated areas. In other words, control the narrative of public opinion so the people who are underneath all this don't have a voice. We want our funding to help build on or catalyse a wider movement for change within a community. Are you seeing the picture yet? Are you getting the bigger picture? At this point, before I give you the good news as who's funding all this and what we can do about it, basically, let's get into our distraction for a few minutes, which is actually David Attenborough versus Greta Thunberg. And I want to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, after this show, I'm going to be putting out the first series of Greta Thunberg versus David Attenborough, and it's going out live after this show. By series, I mean it's the first 3 episodes. So if you've missed any of them, I'm going to put them out as little series. But just as a bit of a taster, if you haven't heard this before, we're going to catch up with David Attenborough versus Greta Thunberg. Now, this is, of course, the imaginary or real sister of the world's greatest climate activist, Greta Thunberg. Let's go over to David Attenborough.
Mayday, mayday, mayday. Overpopulation and climate emergency. All our environmental problems become easier to solve with fewer people, and harder and ultimately impossible to solve with ever more people.
That's eugenics, David. You're a Nazi! Who gives you the right to say how many people are in the world?
I have a global platform through the BBC and many other outlets, and I've become somewhat of an authority on the matter through the organisation Population Matters, of whom I am a patron.
Who says?
Well, they do.
So, why are you on the planet, David? You just read out live for a living. What use is that? You're a useful idiot.
Well, I'm useful, yes. A growing number of scientists, activists and members of the public are recognising that action to address a global population of 7.7 billion people is a necessity like never before in human history.
There you go again! And you said growing twice. Implanting words.
That's the Population Matters website, actually. the role of population matters is to spread the message, encourage smaller families, and ensure that action to achieve a sustainable population becomes policy.
Yes, but in Europe, the indigenous population is falling.
With the UN Replacement Migration Compact, we are keeping the population growing as forecast and within the projections for a sustainable population.
Stop lying! You said polar bears were going extinct, and that was rubbish!
We believe everyone should have the freedom and ability to choose a smaller family. We support human rights, women's empowerment, and global justice.
Everyone already has that choice, David. It's a right, not a benefit, or even an entitlement.
What's wrong with empowering women?
That's UN manipulation of language. Empowerment means control. Justice means collective control. Women's rights means control of minds on reproduction. Fascist scum off our street! Fascist scum off our streets!
Oh, not again.
Yes!
No.
Yes!
No.
You started it, you Nazi!
It was Darwin, actually, and his associates such as Charles Lyell.
Fascist baby killer!
We ensure that the facts we use are the strongest and most useful. We publish the twice-yearly Journal of Population and Sustainability, examining the issues in depth and a wide range of briefings and analyses.
The UN gives you their plans and you repeat them.
Well, yes, that's right, actually.
Do you realise? If you had your way, my sister Greta would never have been born!
Oh, Greta, St. Greta, our inspiration, our eco-warrioress, our global agent of change.
Actually, David, you have a point. If you had your way, Greta would not have been born, and I would have been Greta the Great, fighting for truth, without my sister lying and getting more famous than me, even though she's less intelligent than I am. That's it. I'm joining. We need smaller families. We need a sustainable population.
OK, abortion is murder. The right of the child is paramount. Children are our future. Yes.
Contraception for all. Bill and Melinda Gates, you are right.
Oh.
There are too many climb-tars in the world.
Yes,
reduce
that's true.
population now. Population matters.
Well, wait a minute, Greta. Who's the fascist now, then?
Nazi!
Fascist.
Nazi!
Fascist. I suppose you support Trump's racist policies. I suppose you want to leave Europe. I suppose you believe that the BBC are not to be trusted.
The latter, David, but it's you who cannot be trusted. Smaller families, no more TV presenters who lie for a living. Sustainable population, no more child actors spouting UN crap like my sister.
Oh dear. Mayday, mayday, mayday.
That was great, and there's more of that after this show. We're going to be putting these out in little sections because we need to lighten things up. Well, I got through quite a lot there. I've been rattling on for about an hour, and we've looked at the controlling of the narrative here. And this organisation, My Society and Involve, the Sortition Foundation, this little triumvirate of narrative controlling subversives, let's have a look at who's funding Involve, shall we? And who was their biggest donor? Yes, you've got it. Coming in at number 1 this week, the Open Society. Mr. Soros gave them £62,725. Well, he gave Extinction Rebellion a lot more than that, didn't he? I bet he has given them more. They're just not disclosing it. And the Esme Fairbairn Foundation. Now, the Esme Fairbairn Foundation is another template social change organisation empowering the rights of people who they want to divide and rule against the rest of us. The usual nonsense, the usual totalitarian nonsense, actually. Well, the Esme Fairbairn Foundation gave them 60 grand. Yes, we've got the Building Change Trust. I mean, they just can't leave it alone, can they? Building Change Trust gave them 59,500, it says here. The Omidyar Network gave them 43,000. Read it on and weep. But there you go. Soros is funding your citizens' assemblies. Well, that's democracy for you, people. Why can't he? What's wrong with that? What's wrong with controlling the narrative of public opinion? It's all for your own good. So I would suggest, and this is just my own suggestion, go out and form your own people's assemblies. Take on these dreadful set up people's assemblies that are happening in every borough in the country and challenge them anytime you can. And if you want to book the bigger picture, please do. Get in touch through the website, and it's really starting to pick up now. there is a lot of interest in it. I get lots of emails every day, and thanks to everyone who is emailing me information and also showing an interest in this. But yes, let's just see what the Sortition Foundation says in conclusion. It's an independent, non-partisan, not-for-profit organisation whose mission is to promote and institute sortition in citizens' assemblies. They have pioneered the use of civic lotteries in the UK. They're all about social change, that's what it says here. A just and inclusive society benefits us all, doesn't it? We fund ambitious and challenging work that puts those who have been marginalised at the heart of creating change. We aim to give people the power to develop their own voices, shine new light on areas of need, and challenge the cultures, systems and behaviours that stand in the way of change. That, in other words, anybody who thinks in a sovereign manner is who they're referring to there. Basically, they want to challenge you and they want to make sure that you don't stand in the way of change. So, another mentoring program into the hive mind, creating the division we want to heal, controlling the narrative, etc., etc., etc. Yes, we've been through it all before, and that's why I wanted to sum up this week with what's going on with citizens' assemblies. I want to make some short videos on it also, and really start breaking this stuff down into very simple little bites. The thing is that once you get the hang of this, it's incredibly simple. It's one template and it's been rolled out, and it's not very intelligent. There's no intelligence behind this. There's repetition and there's manipulation and there's social engineering. But there's no actual intelligence. I'm going to sign off now because we're going to have a Greater Thunderbird and David Attenborough special, which comes straight after this show in our list. And I'm quite looking forward to listening to those. So thanks a lot, everybody. And do turn up at Glastonbury Town Hall. And if you can, we are there on Friday. Let's just give you the date to that again, because it's quite an important one. We are going to be there with myself, Piers Corbyn, and David Dubine, and it's the Friday the 1st of November, Glastonbury Town Hall, 7 to 11 p.m, £10 on the door, and we will probably carry on the conversation after the event, as we usually do. Saturday 9th of November, we're in Brighton, don't know where yet, just got to organise that this week. Saturday 16th of November, we're in Bristol at the Arc, 27 Broad Street. Sunday 24th of November, we're in Aberdeen at the Turriff Baden-Powell Community Centre. Saturday 30th of November, the Bigger Picture, Colchester, 1:30 p.m. to 7 p.m. That's £10 in advance, £12 on the door. There's an Eventbrite bookings page, and the poster to that is on the website, and that's going to be our little template for the future. In other words, what we're going to do is we're going to control the narrative of the narrative controllers. Yes, our new mantras are, they decide your future. Who are they? We're going to tell you. Global policies bypass all national governments. Everyone needs to know that. The climate of change is driven by global policy and it's not the weather. We're going to tell you about that. Everything you need to know, but we're never told. We're going to tell you about that. So that's it, everyone. Thanks a lot. And see you very soon on Windows on the World, and see you even sooner if you come and see our talk next Friday. That's it from me. Good night.
Join me, Mark Windows, for Windows on the World live every Sunday 9 to 11 p.m. GMT. Check out our archive and programme stream at windowsontheworld.net.